Chapter 4 At the Flourish and Bonds. Life at the Burrow was as different as possible from life in Pride Drive. They just played like everything net and order. The Weasley's house was with a spring and a patch. Harry got a shock the first time he looked in the mirror over the kitchen mantelpiece and shouted, "Tuck your shaving in, Scarfy!" The gull in the attic howled and dropped pipes whenever he went. He felt things were getting too quiet. And small explosions from Fred and John's bedroom were considered perfectly normal. What Harry felt most injured about life at perfectly normal. What had at Ron's, however, wasn't the taking mirror of the clanking gull. It was the fact that everybody there seemed to like him. Mr. Weasley felt over the state of his shock and tried to force him to eat forest helpings at every meal. Mr. Weasley liked Harry to sit next to him at the dinner table that he could bombard him with questions about life in Muggles, asking him to explain how the things like plugs and the postal service worked. "Fantastic," he would say, as Harry took at him such using the telephone. "Ingenious, really? How many ways Muggles have found of getting along without magic?" Harry heard from Hogwarts one sunny morning about a week after he had arrived at the Burrow. He and Ron went down to the breakfast to find Miss and Mrs. Weasley and Ginny already sitting at the kitchen table. The moment she saw Harry, Ginny accidentally knocked her porridge bowl on the floor with a loud clatter. Ginny seemed very prone to knocking the things over whenever Harry entered the room. She dived under the table to retrieve the bowl and imagined with her face glowing with the setting sun, pretending he hadn't noticed this. Harry sat down and looked at the toast Mr. Weasley offered him. "Letters from school," said Mr. Weasley, passing Harry and Ron unintentionally envelopes of yellowish parchment, addressed in green ink. "John Letter already knows you are here, Harry. Doesn't miss a trick. That, ma'am, you two have got them too," he added as Fred and John obeyed, still in their pajamas. For a few minutes there was silence as they read their letters. Harry told him to catch the Hogwarts Express as usual from King's Cross Station to September the 1st. There were also lists for the new books he did know for the coming year. Second-year students will require the Standard Book of Spells, Grade 2 by Mindarda Skoshka, Break with the Bad Vessel by Gilderoy Lockhart, Garden with Gosh by Gilderoy Lockhart, Holiday with Hags by Gilderoy Lockhart, Travels with Trolls by Gilderoy Lockhart, Vongans with Vampires by Gilderoy Lockhart, Wanderings with Werewolves by Gilderoy Lockhart, Year Will the Typed by Gilderoy Lockhart. Fred, who had finished our list, peered over at Harry's. "You have been to get old Lockhart's book, too," he said. "The new Defense Against as a Dark Teacher must be a fan. That is the witch." At this point, Fred caught his mother's eyes and quickly busied himself with the marble. "That lot won't come cheap," said Herr John, with a quick look at his parents. "Lockhart's books are really expensive." "Well, we will manage," said Mr. Weasley, but she looked worried. "I expect we will be able to put up for a lot of Ginny things second-hand." "Oh, are you starting at Hogwarts this year?" Harry asked Ginny. She nodded, blushing to the roots of her flaming hair, and put her elbow in the butter dish. Fortunately, no one saw this excited Harry, because just then Ron's other brother Percy walked in. He was already dressed, his Hogwarts perfect bench pinned to his naked tank top. "Morning all," said Percy briskly. "Lovely day." He sat down in the one only remaining chair but left it up again, almost immediately pulling from the underneath him about grey feather duster. At last, that was what Harry thought it was, until he saw it was the breathing. Arrow, said Ron, taking the limb out from Percy and extracting a letter from under its wing. Finally, he has got Hermione's answer. I wrote to her saying we were going to recuse you from the Dursley. He carried Arrow for a pitch just inside the back door and tried to sign him on it. But Arrow flopped straight off against the Ron, not him on the drowning part instead, muttering. Pathetic. Then he ripped open Hermione's letter and read it out loud. Dear Ron and Harry, if you are there, I hope everything went all right and that Harry is okay, and that you didn't do anything illegal to get him out. Ron, because that would get Harry into trouble too. I've been really worried, and if Harry is all right, will you please let me know at once, but perhaps it would be better if you used a different owl, because I think another DVD might finish your one off. I'm very busy with schoolwork. Of course, how can she be? Said Ron in horror. We are on holiday, and we're going to London next with Betsy to buy my new book. Why don't we meet in Diagon Alley? Let me know that it's happening as soon as you can. Love from Hermione. Well, that fits in nicely. We can go and get all your things then too, said Mr. Weasley, starting to clear the table. What are you all up today? Harry, Ron, Fred, and John were planning to get up the hill to small paddock the Weasley out. It was surrounded by trees that blocked in front view of the village below, meaning that they could practice Quidditch there, as long as they didn't fly too high. They couldn't use real Quidditch balls, which would have been hard to explain if they had escaped and flown away over the village. Instead, they threw apples for each other to catch. They took it turns to ride Harry's Nimbus 2000, which was easily the best broom. Ron's old shooting star was often aspirated by passing butterflies. 5 minutes later, they were marching up the hill, broomsticks over their shoulders. They had asked Percy if he wanted to join them, but he had said he was busy. Harry had only seen Percy at no time so far. He stayed shut in his room at the rest of the time. Wish I knew that what he was up to do, said Fred, frowning. He is not himself. His exam results came the day before your death. 12 OWLS, and he hardly gloated at all. Ordinary wizarding levels, George explained, seeing Harry's pleased look. Bill got 12 too. If we are not careful, we will have another head boy in the family. I don't think I could stand the shame. Bill was the oldest Weasley brother. He and the next brother, Charlie, had already left Hogwarts. Harry had never met either of them, but knew that Charlie was in romantic and studying dragons, and Bill in Egypt, working for the Wizard Bank. Greek gods. Do you know how Mom and Dad are going to afford all of your school stuff this year? Said John after a while. 5 sets of Lockhart's book, and Ginny's robes and a wand and everything. Harry said nothing. He felt a bit awkward. Started in the underground lounge at Green Tots in London was a so small fortune that his parents had let him. Of course, it was only in the wizarding world that he had money. You couldn't use gallons, sickles, and nuts in maple shops. He had never mentioned its returns bank account to Dursley. He didn't think their horror of anything connected with magic could stack to a large pool of gold. Mr. Weasley woke them all early the following Wednesday. After a quick half a dozen bacon sandwiches each, they pulled on their coats, and Mr. Weasley took a fair part of the kitchen mansion, please, and peered inside. We are running low, Arthur, she sighed. We will have to buy some more today. Well, guess first. After you, Harry, dear. And she offered him the flower pot. Harry stared at them all, watching him. What am I supposed to do? He stammered. He has never traveled by flower powder, said Ron suddenly. Sorry, Harry, I forgot. Never? Said Mr. Weasley. But how did you get to Diagon Alley to buy your school things last year? I went on the underground. Really? said Mr. Weasley eagerly. Were 3 escapers? How exactly? Not now, Arthur, said Mr. Weasley. Floor powers a lot quicker, dear. But goodness me, if you are never used it before. He'll be all right, Mom, said Fred. Harry, watch us first. He took a pinch of glittering powder out of the flower pot, stabbed it up to the fire, and threw the powder into the flames. With a roar, the fire turned a glumsy green and rose higher than Fred, who stabbed right into an giant alley and vanished. You must speak clearly, dear, Mr. Weasley told Harry, as Ron disappeared his hand into the flower pot. And might you get out of the regret? The right what? Said Harry nervously, as the fire roared and wiped the yarn out of sight too. Well, there are an awful lot of wizard fires to choose from, you know, but as long as you have spoken clearly, he'll be fine, Molly. John Futz, said Mr. Weasley, helping himself to floor powder too. But dear, if he got lost, how would we ever explain to his aunt and uncle? They wouldn't mind, Harry retorted. Don't they think it was a brilliant joke if I got lost up a chimney? Don't worry about that. Right. You go after Arthur, said Mr. Weasley. Now, when you get into the fire, say where you are going, and keep your elbows tucked in on the vines and your eyes shut, said Mr. Weasley. The suit. Don't forget, said Ron, or you might well fall out of the warm fireplace. But don't panic and get too early. Wait until you see Fred and John. Trying hard to bear all things in mind, Harry took a pinch of flour powder and walked into the edge of the fire. He took a deep breath, scorching the powder into the flames and zapped it forwards. The fire felt like a warm breeze. He opened his mouth and immediately startled a lot of ash. That's the dragon alley, he called. It felt as though he was being sucked down a punch-clock hole. He seemed to be spinning very fast. The roaring in his ears was deafening. He tried to keep his eyes open, but the whirl of green flames made by him feel speak. Something hard knocked his eyeball. He saw it gently still spinning and spinning. Now it felt as such cold hands were slapping the rim of fireplace and snatching glimpses of the rooms beyond. His bacon sandwiches were charring inside him. He closed his eyes again, wishing it could stop, and then he fell face forward onto cold stone and felt his glasses totter. Dizzy and bewildered, covered in soot, he got gingerly to his feet. Holding his broken glasses out to his eyes, he was quite alone. But where he was, he had no idea. All he could tell was standing in the stone fireplace, of what it looked like a large, dimly lit wizard shop. But nothing in here was ever likely to be on a Hogwarts school list. A glass case nearby held, and with delicate hand on the cushion, a blue-sponged bag of cards and a staring glass's eye. Every looking next leverage down from the walls. Excitement of human bones lay upon the couch and rusty. Speaking instruments hung from the ceiling, even rods. The dark, narrow stretch Harry could see through the dusty shop window was eventually not diagon alley. The sooner he got out of here, the better. No still singing were in the hearth. Harry made his way swiftly and silently towards the door, but before he did go halfway toward it, 2 people appeared on the other side of the glasses, and one of them was the very last person Harry wanted to meet with when he was lost, covered in soot and wearing broken glasses. Draco Malfoy. Harry looked quickly around and spotted a large black cabin to his left. He trotted inside it and pulled the door to, leaving a small scratch to peer touch. Seconds later, a bell changed, and Malfoy stepped into the shop. The man who followed could only be his father. He had the same pale, powdered face and unusually cold grey eyes. Mr. Malfoy crossed the shop, looking lazily at the items on display and rang the bell on the counter before turning to his son and saying, "Catch nothing, Draco." Malfoy, who had reached for the glasses eye, said, "I thought you were going to buy me a present." "I said I would buy you a racing broom," said his father, thumping his fingers to the counter. "What is the good of that if I'm not in the house team?" said Malfoy, looking sulky and bad-tempered. "Harry Potter got a Nimbus 2000 last year, special permission from Dumbledore so he could play for Gryffindor. He's not even that good. It is just because he's famous. Famous for having a stupid scar on his forehead." Malfoy bent down to examining in the shelf full of schools. "Everyone thinks he's so smart. Wonderful Potter, with his scar and his broomstick." "You have told me this at least a dozen times already," said Mr. Malfoy with a queerly look at his son, "and I would remind you that it's not prudent to appear less than that of Harry Potter, than not when most of our kind regarded him as the hero who made the Dark Lord disappear. Ah, Mr. Boggin." A sobbing man had appeared behind the counter, smoothing his scarchy hair back from his face. "Mr. Malfoy, what a pleasure to see you again," said Mr. Boggin in a voice as oily as his hair. "Delighted, and young Master Malfoy too. Charmed. How may I be expunged? I must show you, just in today, and very responsibly priced." "I'm not buying today, Mr. Boggin, but selling," said Mr. Malfoy. "Selling?" The smile faded slightly from Mr. Boggin's face. "You have heard, of course, that the Ministry is conducting more rats," said Mr. Malfoy, taking a roll of parchment from his inside pocket and unraveling it for Mr. Boggin to read. "I have a few items at home that might embarrass me if the Ministry were to call." Mr. Boggin fixed the pince nez to his nose and looked down the list. "The Ministry wouldn't presume to trouble you, sir. Surely?" Mr. Malfoy slipped forward. "I have not been visited yet. The name Malfoy still commands a certain respect, yet the Ministry grows ever more meddlesome. There are rumors about new Muggles Protection Act. No doubt that flea-bitten, Muggle-loving fool Arthur Weasley is behind it." Harry felt a hot surge of anger. "And as you see, certain of these potions might make it appear." "I understand, sir, of course," said Mr. Boggin. "Let me see." "Can I have that?" interrupted Draco, pointing at the withered hands on the cushions. "Ah, the hand of glory," said Mr. Boggin, and joining Mr. Malfoy's lips, scurrying over to Draco. "Insert a candle, and it gives light only to the holder. Best friend of thieves and plunderers. Your son has fine tests, sir. I hope my son will amount to more than the theft of a plunder, Boggin," said Mr. Malfoy coldly, and Mr. Boggin said quickly, "No offense, sir. No offense meant. Such if it could make don't pick up," said Mr. Malfoy more coldly still. "The many indebted to be all has it for." "It is not my fault," retorted Draco. "The teachers all have favorites, that Hermione Granger. I have thought you did be ashamed that a girl of no wizarded family beat you in every exam," snapped his mouth Mr. Malfoy. "Huh," said Harry under his breath, pleased to see Draco looking both abashed and angry. "Is the sim all over?" said Mr. Boggin in his oily voice. "Wizarding blood is catching for less everywhere." "Not with me," said Mr. Malfoy, his long nostrils flaring. No, sir, not with me, sir," said Mr. Boggin with a deep bow. "In that case, perhaps that can return to my list," said Mr. Malfoy shortly. "I'm something of a hurry, Boggin. I have important business elsewhere today." They started to haggle. Harry watched nervously as Draco drew nearer and nearer to his hiding place. Examining the objects for sale, he paused to examine a long collar of hangman's rope to enter it, sprinkling the card propped on the magnificent necklace opposed. Caution, do not touch, Kurtz has claimed the lives of 19 Mongol hours to date. Draco turned away and saw the cabin right in front of him. He walked forward. He stretched out his hand for the handle. John, said Mr. Mumford at the counter. Come, Draco. Harry wiped his forehead on his sleeve as Draco turned away. Good day to you, Mr. Boggin. I will be back at the Manor tomorrow to pick up the goods. The moment the door had closed, Mr. Boggin took his oily manner. Good day yourself, Mr. Malfoy, and if the stories are true, you haven't sold me half of what is hiding in your manor. Maturing darkly, Mr. Boggin disappeared into a back room. Harry waited for a minute in case he came back. Then, quickly, as he could slip out of the cabin, she passed the glasses case and knocked at the top door. Clutching his broken glass to his face and his dark around, he had imagined into a digitally old way that seemed to be made up entirely of Soap's devotion to the dark arts. The one he's just left, locked in a box, looked like the blankets, but opposite was a nasty window displayed of slender heads, and 2 doors down, a large cage was lighted with gigantic backsliders. 2 shabby-looking wizards were watching him from the shadow of a doorway, muttering to each other, hopping against a happy that able to find a way out of there. An old wooden switch tracked in hiding over a shop steadily. Her chosen candles told him was and clearly enough thought she smellful asked bags in the whale fire. Trying to stay calm, he wondered what to do. Not lost as you, my dear, said a voice in his ear, making him jump. A natural stood in front of him, holding a straight, what looked like a cardboard human rhinoceros. She leered at him, showing mostly his teeth. Harry backed away. I'm fine, thanks, he said. I'm just... Harry! What dare you think you are doing down there? Harry's heart leapt. So did the witch. A lot of fingers scratched down over her feet, and she cursed at the mischievous form of Hagrid, the Hogwarts gamekeeper. Kept striding towards them, battle-back Alice flushing over his red bitch's spot. Hagrid, Harry cried in relief. I was lost. For power. Harry started Harry by the scruff of the neck and pulled him away from the witch, knocking the tray right out of her hands. Her jacket followed them all the way along the trestle, all the way out into bright sunlight. Harry saw a familiar, snow-white marble body in the distance. Green tongues blinked. Hagrid has reached him right into Dragon Alley. Yeah, a mess, said Hagrid frugally, brushing such off Harry so forcefully he nearly locked him into a barrel of dragon dung outside an debauchery, squeaking around not turned away. I do know, jockey, please. Harry, don't want to know until you see you down there. I realize that, said Harry, ducking as Hagrid made to brush him off again. I told you, I was lost. What were you doing down there, anyway? I was looking for a flesh-eating, stock repentant, glowered Hagrid. They are running the school habits. You are not on your own. I stayed with the Weasley, but he got stopped. Harry explained, I've got to find them. They set off to get down the street. How come you never run back to me? Said Hagrid. As Harry jogged alongside him, he had to take 3 steps to the sight of Harry's enormous boots. Harry explained all about Dobby and Dursley. Ruddy muggles, growled Hagrid. If we did have known... Harry, over here! Harry looked up and saw Hermione Granger standing all at the top of the white flight of steep to Gringotts. She ran down to meet them, her bushy brown hair flying behind her. What happened to see your glasses? Hello, Hagrid. Oh, it is wonderful to see you two again. Are you coming into great thoughts, Harry? As soon as I have found the Weasley, said Harry. You won't have long to tear away, grinned Hagrid. Harry and Ron and Hermione looked around. Sprinting up the crowd which were Ron, Fletch, John, and Percy, and Mr. Weasley. Harry, Mr. Weasley pat. We hope you're the only one gone too far. He mopped his gossip patch. Molly's frantic. She's coming now. Where did you come out? Ron asked. Nocturnal early, said Hagrid grimly. Brilliant, said Fletch and John together. We have never been alone at inn, said Ron eventually. I should really well think not, growled Hagrid. Mr. Weasley now came galloping into view, her handbag swinging in one hand, Ginny just clinging into the other. Oh, Harry, oh my dear, you can't have been anywhere. Gasping for breath, she pulled a large cloth brush out of her bag and began sweeping off the soot. Harry didn't have money to bet away. Mr. Weasley took Harry's glasses, gave them a tap in one and returned, good as new. Well, gotta be off, said Hagrid, who was having his hand wrung by Mr. Weasley. Nocturnal early, if you hadn't found him, Hagrid. See you at Hogwarts, and be sorted away, head and shoulders taller than everyone else in the pack's width. Guess who I saw embarking in the box? Harry asked Ron and Hermione as they climbed and the winter step. Malfoy and his father. Did Lucius Malfoy buy anything? Said Mr. Weasley, stumbling behind them. No, he was traveling. So he is worried, said Mr. Weasley with grim satisfaction. Oh, I'd love to get Lucius Malfoy for something. You be careful, Arthur, said Mr. Weasley charmingly, as they were ushered into the bank by a growling gobbly at the door. The family's trouble. Don't go beating off more than you can chew. So you don't think I am a match for Lucius Malfoy? Said Mr. Weasley ingeniously, but he was distracted almost at once by the sight of Hermione's parents, who were standing nervously at the counter that ran all along the great marble hall, waiting for Hermione to introduce them. But you are muggles, said Mr. Weasley dejectedly. We must have a drink. What is that you have got there? Oh, you are chanting muggle money. Molly, look! He pointed excitedly at the 10-pound notes in Mr. Granger's hand. Meet you back here, Ron said to Hermione, as Weasley and Harry were led off their underground valuation by another Green Goddess goblin. The vessels were reached by the means of small goblin driver carts that speeded along miniature trains through the bunk underground tunnels. Harry enjoyed the breakneck journey down to the Weasley's ranch, but felt dreadful fireworks that he had in the northern alley. When it was open, there was a very small pile of silver singles in sight, and just one gold galleon. Mr. Weasley fell right into the covers before sweeping the whole lot into her bag. Harry felt even worse when they reached his pouch. He tried to block the contents from view as he had justly shoved handfuls of coins into a leather bag outside on the marble steps. They were scraped, Percy mutured carefully about needing a new coat. Fred and John had stopped their friend from Hogwarts, Lee Jordan. Mr. Weasley and Ginny were going to a second-hand grub shop. Mr. Weasley was insisting on taking the Grangers off to see a leaky cauldron for a drink. We are all made of flourish and blues in the hour to buy the schoolboats, said Mr. Weasley, setting off for Ginny, and not one step down Knockhorn Alley, she shouted at the twins, retreating back. Harry, Ron, and Hermione strode off all along the winding, cobbly street. The bag of gold, silver, and bronze jangling cheerfully in Harry's pocket was clamoring to be sent. So he bought their large strawberry and peanut Butter ice cream, which they slobbered happily as they wandered up the alley, expanding the fantastic shop windows. Ron gathered wrongly, examining at a full set of truly canon bulbs, the windows of quality Quidditch supplies, until Hermione dragged them off to buy the ink and parchment next door, and Gumbo and Jip's wizarding workshop. They met Fresh George and Lee Jordan, who were stocking up on the Fitbirds or Farmer's wet start. No had fireworks, and a tiny junk shop filled at broken ones. One bracket scales and an old clock's off covered in the potion stations. They found Percy, deeply immersed in a small and deeply boring but cold perfect two grand power. A study of Hogwarts perfects and their later carried. Ron read aloud of the back cover. That sounds fantastic. Go away, Percy snapped. Course, he is very ambitious. Percy has got it planned out. He wants to be a minister of magic. Ron told Harry and Hermione understood as they left Percy to it. An hour later, they headed for Flourish and Blotts. They were by no means the only ones making their way to the bookshop. As they approached it, they thought they surprised a large crowd jostling outside the doors, trying to get in. The reason for his roar was approached by a large banner stretching across the upper windows. Gilderoy Lockhart will be singing copies of his autobiography, Magical Me, today, night 12:30 to 4:30 p.m. We can actually meet him, Hermione squeaked. I mean, he is running almost the whole booklet. The crowd seemed to be made up mostly of witches around Mr. Weasley's edge. A hearty-looking wizard stood at the door saying, Calmly, please, ladies, don't push. There am I the books now. Harry, Ron, and Hermione split inside. A long quack went right to the back of the shop, where Gilderoy Lockhart was singing his book. They each grabbed a copy or break with the vaccines and stick it up the line where the rest of the Weasley were standing up with Miss and Mrs. Granger. Oh, there you are. Good, said Mr. Weasley. She shouted breathless and kept fanning her hair. We will be able to see him in a minute. Gilderoy Lockhart came slowly into view, seated at the table surrounded by large pictures of his old face, all winking and flashing deliciously white teeth at the crowd. The real Lockhart was wearing robes of forget-me-not, but which exactly matched his eyes. His part of wizarding hat was set as a gently mantle on his hair. A short, terrible-looking man was dancing around taking photographs with a large black camera that eventually puffed up purple smoke with every bending flash. Out of the way, there, he snatched at Ron, moving back to get a better shot. This is for the Daily Prophet. Big deal, said Ron, popping his foot where the photograph had saved on it. Gilderoy looked here at him. He looked up. He saw Ron, and then he saw Harry. He started. Then he leapt to his feet and possibly shouted, It can't be Harry Potter! The crowd apart, whispering excitedly. Lockhart dived forward, seized Harry's arm and pulled him to the front. Then shook his hand for the photographer, who was clicking away madly, knocking the smoke over the Weasley. Nice big smile, Harry, said Lockhart, from his out gleaming teeth. Together, you and I are worth the front bench. When he finally let go of Harry's hand, Harry could hardly feel his fingers. He tried to slide back down to the Weasley, but Lockhart he knew threw an arm around his shoulder and jumped tightly to his side. Ladies and gentlemen, he said loudly, waiting for quite what extraordinary moment this is. This perfect moment for me to take a little announcement I have been sitting on for some time. When young Harry has dived into Flourish and Blotts today, he only wanted to buy my autograph, which I shall be happy to present him now, free of charge. The crowd approached again. He had no idea, Lockhart continued, giving Harry a little shake that made his glasses slip to the end of his that he would not only be getting much more than my book, Magical Me. He and his schoolfellows will, in fact, be getting the real Magical Me. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I got great pleasure and pride in announcing that this September I'll be taking up the post of defense against the dark arts teacher at Hogwarts School of Wizarding and Wizarding. You have this, Harry numbered to her, tapping the books into the cauldron. I'll buy my owl. Bet you loved that, didn't you, Potter? Said a voice Harry had no trouble recording. He read it up and found himself faced with Draco Malfoy, who was wearing his usual stare. Famous Harry Potter, said Malfoy, can't even go into a bookshop without making the front page. Leave him alone. He didn't want all that, said Ginny. It was the first time she had spoken in front of Harry. She was glaring at Malfoy. Potter, you thought yourself a golden friend? Threatened Malfoy. Ginny went scratching at once and Hermione flushed their way over, both clutching scarves of Lockhart's books. Oh, it's you, said Ron, looking at Malfoy as if here were something upstanding, pleased on the sole of his shoe. Bet you are surprised to see Harry here. Not as surprised I am to see you in the shop, Weasley, reported Malfoy. I suppose your parents will go hungry for a month to pay that lot. Ron ran as red as Ginny, dropped his book into the cauldron, too, and started towards Malfoy. But Harry and Hermione grabbed the back of his jacket. Ron, said Mr. Weasley, chuckling over with Fred and John. What are you doing? It's hot in here. Let's go outside. Well, Arthur Weasley? It was Mr. Malfoy. He stood with his hand on Draco's shoulder, staring in just the same way. Lucius, said Mr. Weasley, nodding coldly. Busy time at the ministry. I hear, said Mr. Malfoy. All those rats. I hope they're paying you overtime. He reached into Greeny's cauldron and distracted from amongst the glossy Lockhart's books, a very old, very battered copy of beginner's guide to transfusions. Obviously not, he said. Jimmy, what is the use of being a distracted to the name of wizard if they don't even pay you? Well of it. Mr. Weasley flushed than Ron or Ginny. We have very different idea of what discusses the name of wizard, Malfoy, he said. Clearly, said Mr. Malfoy, his full eyes straying to Miss and Mr. Granger, who were watching approachingly. The company you keep, Weasley, and I thought your family could sink no lower. There was a touch of mental as Ginny's cauldron went rattling. Mr. Weasley had thrown himself on Mr. Malfoy, knocking him backwards into a bookshelf. Dozens of heavy spell books came thundering loud on the hands. There was a yell of, "Get him, Dad!" from Fred and John. Mr. Weasley was shivering. "No, Arthur, no!" The crowd stepped backwards, knocking more shelves over. "Gentlemen, please, please!" cried the assassin, and then, louder than all, "Break it up, there! Gents, break it up!" Harry was leaning towards them, the sea of books. It is an instant he had pulled Mr. Weasley and Mr. Malfoy apart. Mr. Weasley had clapped at Mr. Malfoy, had been hit in the eye by incredibly absurd books. He was still holding Ginny's old transfusions book. He turned it at her, his eyes glittering with malice. "Here, girl, take a book. It's the best your father can give you." Pulling himself up of his grip, he beckoned to Draco and swept from the school. "Yeah, you shouldn't have ignored him, Arthur," said Hagrid, almost leading Mr. Weasley off his hand and switched his robe. Ron cleared the car. The whole family, everyone knows that. No Malfoys worth listening. Tear, bad blood. That is what it is. Come on now, let's get out here. The examiner looked as such he wanted to stop them leaving, but he bravely came out to Hagrid's present and seemed to think better of it. They hurried up to the switch, and the Grangers shaking with rage, and Mr. Weasley beside herself with fury. A fight example to set to your children, brawling in public, what Gilderoy Lockhart must have thought. He was pleased, said Fritz. Didn't you hear him as he were leaving? He was asking the bloke from Daily Parkbat if he'd able to work the fight into his report. Said it was all punctually. But it was a stoppish group who haggled about to the fireside in the leaky cauldron, where Harry, the Weasley, and all their shopping would be travelling back to the barrel using flour powder. They said goodbye to the Grangers, who were leaving the pub for the Muggle Street on the other side. Miss Weasley started to ask him now how but work, but stopped quickly as they looked on Mr. Weasley's face. Harry took off his glasses and pulled them safely in his pocket before helping himself to a flour powder. It eventually wasn't his favorite way to travel.